Welcome to the Dragon's Library, your source for games, movies, shows, and more. Hello everybody, and welcome to the Dragon's Library again. Today, we're going to be doing something different for once. Again! I know, I've just been rolling out new stuff. So, today, we're going to be doing an anime! Yay! Sorry, I'm just really excited. I actually haven't done any anime yet. I don't believe. Which is weird considering how many of them I watch. But now we get to do one. So, recently, that time I got Reincarnated as a Slime. Apologies for people who don't watch anime, usually get used to the weird titles. Wrapped up its second season, and I want to use this as an opportunity to talk about it. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Now, today I'm just going to be talking about the whole series in general. I'm not going to be going into a lot of specifics. At first, and it'll kind of be a summary of Season 1, Season 2, Part 1, and Season 2, Part 2. Because anime breaks its seasons into two parts now. But, yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoy it. This is probably one of my favorite series that's currently airing. Not my absolute favorite, but it's definitely like a guilty pleasure. So the whole premise of That Time I Got Reincarnated as a Slime is it's basically an isekai anime. And for those of you who don't know what isekai is, it's basically a genre-ish of anime where the whole premise is the protagonist gets teleported into a new world, usually with some kind of really overpowered ability that makes them special, and they basically get teleported into a fantasy world from the real world. Now, the gimmick with That Time I Got Reincarnated as Slime is kind of, in the title right there. The main character is this boring office worker, and he spends his entire life kind of just having a normal life. But then, while walking to work one day, he saves his best friend and his girlfriend from getting stabbed by a random psycho. He dies, though, in the process, and his last wish is, please, delete my browser history, which is kind of a joke in and of itself. And as he's dying, he's contacted by some kind of godlike entity and promised that due to his heroism, he's going to be reincarnated into a new world. So he starts hearing, game logic stuff going on, and he's asked what he would want in that world. And of course, he's dying at the moment, so his thoughts aren't really coherent. He wanted to understand things, he wanted to be not cold, and he wanted to be able to grow and experience it. So basically, he gets three basic abilities, I believe, to start with. The first is heat resistance, which is a very basic one, but it comes back a few times throughout the series. The second is an ability called Great Sage, which is basically an onboard wiki and analysis tool. Basically, a voice in his head. Sort of like if you ever watched the old Shazam show, he had the Wisdom of Solomon. It was just like a voice in his head that told him whatever he wanted to know. That's basically Great Sage. It gets kind of progressively more sarcastic as the series goes on, too, which is always funny. And the ability to grow turns into Predator, which is his ability to consume other creatures and gain their abilities. So he's reincarnated as a slime, and anything he eats, he can replicate using his own magic, and he can slowly grow more powerful by eating other creatures. So he wakes up, and at first he has to get used to moving as a slime. And it's actually a really cool experience. The first episode in particular is actually very interesting in the way, you spend an entire episode, he gets used to how to see as a slime, how to, feel the world around him, growing to be able to actually see the world around him. He gathers up some plants, gets used to moving around, manages through a bit of luck to kill a spider and eat its ability, so now he's got this web-swinging ability. And he goes, around this cave he spawned, he finds some magical plants and crystals and uses them to make a few potion things. And it just slowly starts getting used to his new life. It's actually really interesting. I like it. The whole show has this kind of zen, relaxing, just chill and watch the world unfold kind of quality to it that I really enjoy. I really can't describe it any better than that. There's just something relaxing about watching him come to grips with this fantasy world and slowly build out from his initial starting point. Now, of course, this is an isekai, and if you're familiar at all with the trappings of isekai anime, you'll know they have a tendency in recent years to give the characters, make the main characters really overpowered. And basically the villains just don't really challenge them at all. that time I got Reincarnated as a Slime is kind of a parody of that. Like, it just outright makes the guy really powerful. So the first episode starts with him, killing a few animals, but he's still not really a majorly powerful creature in the world. He's like more powerful than your average monster, but he's still like a level 1 slime for the most part. But then he meets the imprisoned storm dragon Veldora, one of like the most powerful beings in this world who had been imprisoned beneath the forest of Jura a long time ago. After our hero beat him after he went on kind of a rampage. But it turns out he's kind of just wants a friend, and Rimuru befriends him, but he can't break his seal. So Rimuru decides to eat the entire seal. After, first Veldora gives him a name, which makes him more powerful, and links him to Veldora, kind of making him like a surrogate son, if that makes sense. It's a little complicated. But basically, we're in a very generic fantasy world where, like, there's the Goblin King. But until he's given a name, he's just the Goblin King and the Goblin King's daughter. That kind of thing. So, people don't really have names unless they're gifted names by more powerful beings. Or they're, powerful beings in their own right. Names are something you have to be given or earn in this world. And so he's given the new name Rimuru Tempest after the storm dragon Veldora Tempest. And he promises to free his new friend, which, it's all very wholesome and nice and fun. And I love the dragon is like this really boastful I will defeat you all. But deep down he just wants a friend, and Rimuru's like, hey dude, I'll just help you out. So he eats the entire seal, which inadvertently gives him a lot of Veldora's power. And Great Sage, the kind of onboard, magic computer in his head, gets to work cracking the magic. But it's going to take a few years, likely. It's most likely going to take at least a few years. So after that, he goes and befriends a village of goblins and gives them all a name. And then a bunch of wolves attack, and he defeats their alpha and, makes the wolves come and join them. So now all the wolves come, and because Rimuru names them all, they become more powerful and evolve into storm wolves and hobgoblins. And, their village is a little run down, so he goes to this new neighboring dwarf kingdom and do some shenanigans. They get some dwarves. Sorry, I'm getting to spoiler territory, so let me just talk about the show's technical quality first. But that's kind of the main plot line. The building of this the forest nation of Jura, the nation of monsters. It's all very interesting. So that's the basic main through line of the show. It's a lot of fun. Like, he's the most overpowered character at basically every segment of the show. There are only like 1 or 2 characters that have ever actually posed a threat to him. But he's, definitely a fun character. He's not as bland as the normal isekai protagonists are. He has a very strong sense of morals, but also his own ideals for this world and what he wants it to become. A lot of the villains he ends up encountering partially due to a difference in ideology and partially due to the fact that the nation of Jura, basically, the inciting incident is Rimuru devouring the Storm Dragon's seal. Because even though he was in prison, the Storm Dragon Veldora, the forest of Jura was his territory. And even with him sealed away, none of the other big players, the big other nations or the demon lords or anything like that, were willing to encroach upon this very powerful being's territory, because if he did get free, and chances were he was eventually going to get free, he would rip them a new one. So when Rimuru devoured him, his magic vanished. And so everyone suddenly became aware that the forest of Jura was up for grabs, which incites nations to come after it, or try to make new alliances with the monsters living there, or to invade it, or to claim it as their own territory. And it basically set off this giant political domino effect, and Rimuru is just kind of dealing with the fallout, which I really like. They actually have a lot of stories dedicated to, inner world politics, or, how potion purity can affect markets and stuff like that, which, if you're into the mechanics of a fantasy world, you're going to find really enjoyable. But if you also just want giant isekai battles with magic and stuff, you're going to be well-serviced. There's a lot of really cool, well-animated fight scenes. The characters can be kind of clever and aren't just always, I'm more powerful than you, that I win. Although they do use that as a joke a lot of the time. And yes, Rimuru is immensely overpowered. But, the show has a decent heart to it. There's a lot of good emotional moments to it that you don't usually see in shows like this that are much better done than, say, things like Sword Art Online. Not to hate on Sword Art Online, because I did like it when I first watched the first season. I still hate the Fairy Dance arc. Screw that stuff. But, when you go back and rewatch it, it's just not as good. Unless you're watching SAO Abridged, in which case, it's hilarious. I'm not talking about SAO. Don't talk about SAO Davis. Bad Davis. So yeah, the show's very well animated. The voice actors are all great. I personally prefer the dub, but I've watched both the sub and the dub at different points because I want to watch new episodes as they come out. All in all, it's an interesting new take on an isekai format that has a likable cast of expanding characters. It gets really large, but also all the characters are distinct enough that you care about them for the most part. And yeah. So that's basically all I have to say on the technical side. I highly recommend this show if you guys aren't willing to go any further for spoilers. If you want my opinion, yes, definitely go watch it. If you're looking for something to get into with anime, it's definitely a good place to start. And yeah. Alright, we're going to full spoilers now, so I'll be talking about the first season. I will let you know when we get to the second season spoilers, so you can go ahead and cut off there if you don't want to. And I'll even let you know when we get to part 1 of the second seasons, and so you can know if you want to just watch part 2, which is still coming out, which just finished coming out the other day. Last episode, forgotten we had to wait so long for season 3. It's gonna be such a disappointment. But yeah. So season 1 progresses pretty normally. You have him slowly building new ties. He runs into some human adventures, including this hero called, what was her name again? Shizu, that's her name, Shizu. And Shizu is actually, because what we find out is that that the mages in this world can summon other worlders, meaning people of, that version of Earth that he came from, as powerful champions. Basically, it's the common isekai ability. They summon them and they gain a unique ability like he did, except they're not always reincarnated, they're usually humans. She was summoned by a demon lord and had a powerful, dangerous spirit called Ifrit bound to her body and used as a dangerous weapon. Eventually, though, she broke free of him, but she's slowly been, eaten alive by the spirit over time. She actually ends up basically dying in the first season. After a little while, after finally losing control of Ifrit, she ends up killed by Rimuru because she asked him to stop her if she lost control. But before that, she was actually, the trick is, she was actually summoned from this world due to the time dilation stuff back during, World War II, when Japan was still, an imperialist nation, and they were being, firebombed, and she was ripped away as her mother and her entire village were burned by firebombs. And this, really dramatic moment of her watching what was probably, to her, the end of the world. And then Rimuru decides, after finding out her past, to show her, basically from his perspective as an adult, show her Japan as it rebuilt. He showed her all the memories of photos and even his own life of Tokyo slowly building from a destroyed ruin into the new metropolis, one of the biggest cities on the planet. And they have this really heartwarming moment of him showing her this whole long stretch, and she just starts crying about how beautiful it is and how he's grateful that she showed her that her home rebuilt and it became better and that there was a happy ending to it all. Which was really, really sweet. Even, I'm not usually as affected by that stuff, but even I had to admit that. I was like, oh, that's just so sweet. But she dies, and after she dies, he devours her body, so he finally gets a human form. It's kind of like a genderless body, though, even though she was a girl and he was originally a boy. So, that happened. Anyway, that basically goes on. A powerful demon lord has started making plays for using an orc army to invade. He makes friends with the Oni, who become powerful allies and become his main lieutenants. They were the ogres, who became the Oni after he named them, and they become all his big lieutenants. He gets a secretary. The princess becomes she's a skilled weaver, so she becomes charge of a lot of the crafts and general stuff like that. The prince, who was trying to avenge his home that had been destroyed by the orcs, becomes his right-hand man when it comes to, dangerous stuff. The ninja one. I forget all these names. There's so many names in this show. There's Rieger, there's, let's see here, the ogre. So there's Benimaru, who's the prince. There's Shuna, she's the princess. There's Shion, she's the secretary. There's Sohi, he becomes the ninja. There's Hakuro, who becomes he's basically, the old master who taught everyone, and he's just, like, such a badass. Like, he goes up against, like, this other worlder who's been working for, like, the evil company. He's, like, a sadistic, evil murderer who's, like, a swordsman. His gift is that he can slow down his perception of time, so he can react like a super speedster. But, after their first battle where he surprised him, he comes around and is just like, yeah, no. He just cuts off his head, and the other guy doesn't even realize what's going on until he's, like, grabbing his head. It's like, use that what time you have left to think on your crimes. And it's like, holy shit, he's a badass. And then Kurobi, who's, like, the blacksmith, who helps with the dwarves in the blacksmithing sections. He's probably the least... he's the one that's least present in the anime. He's only really present in the first segment and a few of the background scenes. But the others all become, like, big recurring characters. And then they have to deal with this invading army of orcs who have been following this orc lord, and they devour everything. It's this really cool final battle. And Ryu finds out they were offered salvation by a demon. If their orc lord could become a demon lord, they would be a powerful pawn of this other demon lord. And he was using the fact that the orcs' homeworld has been, like, decimated, and they're all, constantly starving and dying, and the orc lord basically gave them the promise of the forest of Jura as a new prosperous home. And Rimuru is unwilling to punish the rest of the orcs, so after he defeats the orc lord and experiences his memories, he decides to spare the rest of the orcs and offer them sanctuary in Jura, which, adds them to the roster of green characters. The right-hand man of their king ends up becoming one, so, he joins in. It's Geld, which is pretty cool. Geld is a pretty nice guy. He ends up becoming a recurring character and one of the big, their main fighters. Then you have Gabuta. He's one of, like, the hobgoblins. He was one of the ones that was already named by some other passing guy a long time ago. And he slowly, like, becomes, like, a badass. Like, there's this one moment where, he's elected by one of Rimuru's lieutenants to fight on their behalf to, like, defend their honor when they meet with the ambassadors of another demon lord. And and Rimuru's always like, wait, Gobta? Really? And then Gobta kicks his ass. And Rimuru's like, wait, I thought he was going to get beat up. And the rest of my lieutenants are going to be like, how dare you touch Gobta? We'll never make you pay for that. But no, he's actually become a little bit of a badass, even though he's a bit goofy looking. Which is, I just love moments like that, where the show constantly just, like, loves subverting your expectation. Then you have the lizard men who joined, Rimuru when they fought the orcs. You have you have Soka Abel, he's the chieftain, and then you have Gabiru, and he's like this really obnoxious, loud general who usurps his father because he believes he's being too weak and passive against the orcs. But then, like, when he fights the orcs, it's like, oh, well, he's actually striking them pretty well. They're just way stronger than he thought. He's not a bad general. He's actually really good, and you can see why a lot of the warriors in their tribe decide to support his coup, because he actually does seem to have a lot of respect from his men. And he ends up, getting banished, but Rimuru ends up giving him sanctuary, that kind of thing. And it's basically just Rimuru going around, making alliances with human and monster nations and groups, slowly adding in a small camaraderie of exiles or people who he really supports and want to go work for him. And they turned that small goblin village with a bunch of dire wolves and goblins into, like, an actual nation that becomes recognized by other kingdoms. And it's just a really cool, all-around fun anime about this guy trying to build something in a new world. This is where I'm going to start going to more spoilers for the second season. For the second season, part 1, Rimuru gets alerted to a bunch of these kids who have magical powers who were called in, but they're really young, so the powers are going to burn through them. He helps work through it, and meets this guy who is so obviously going to betray him. For those of you who don't know, he definitely betrays him. Like, you figure it out by the end of the season. I told you, season 2's part 1, you figured out by the end of this, so I warned you there were going to be spoilers. So he's like the Adventure Guild leader, and he knew Shizu. And he ends up selling Rimuru out, because apparently he's working with some kind of demon lord, or maybe manipulating them. It's all very unclear, but I can't wait for season 3 when they're going to punch his face in. I seriously cannot wait for that any longer. And what happens is, due to a rival nation who's worried that their trade routes are going to be disrupted by the forest nation of Jura, or the Jura Alliance, decides to attack the nation, using the Holy Church, like, the Holy Paladin Army, who see monsters as nothing more than a threat. And they basically try to incite an incident and use the Holy Knights and army and mages and priests to destroy the fourth nation of Jura. Meanwhile, the guild leader manages to trick Hinata, who is like the big badass, like was Shisu's partner, and after Shisu left to go kind of slowly die, she became like the best warrior of them all. She's probably one of the only people in the series that's actually as strong, if not stronger than Rimuru. She catches them off guard with a power nullifying barrier that robs him of a lot of his biggest powers, but she also actually does match him blow for the most part. Meanwhile, their nation is being attacked, a bunch of their citizens die, but the barrier means that their magic, which in this world is kind of their souls, is still being contained there. It hasn't like dispersed into the natural magic of the world. So Rimuru decides to use something called the Demon Seed, which he acquired from being the Orc Lord, to become a Demon Lord, because if he does, he'll gain the ability to resurrect his subjects. Only in this very specific, and I do like the way they do it, it's very specifically, hey, this very specific barrier which prevents monster magic from escaping this area, which we layer with another barrier after we discover the properties of it. After which I'll gain my powers when we break the monster barrier, but the new barrier will keep their magic inside. And so long as I become a demon lord, and I also have to use the life force of two other demons, to use this very, very dangerous and unstable ability, with Great Sage, I can bring them back, but only in this very, very specific circumstance. So it's sort of like, magic warrior is possible, but it's so dangerous and requires so much power that it's like not worth it. But anyway, since this nation is like super corrupt and the church has gotten some really shady stuff, Rimuru goes full, you have killed my family and loved ones, you will not get away with this, and freaking slaughters them all. Like, literally, he just floats above them and is like, alright, I need 10,000 souls. Let's do this. And he uses this like water droplet that reflects lasers through the entire camp. And the entire time, like, they're running around, like, they're trying to escort the king and the high priest. And they manage to get into the tent with him. Because Rimuru doesn't want him dead yet. And the guard's like, don't worry, I'll use my ability to gather the soldiers, and I'll make them use their own bodies as shields to protect you, my lord. And they're all like, oh, thank goodness you're doing this right. And they even have this powerful mage with them, and he just gets one shot, and the other guy walks outside and immediately gets one shot. And they're just like freaking out, and Rimuru's like, you are not even worth it. And obviously Rimuru gets the abilities, becomes a new demon. He gets this new demon art sidekick who might be something called Primordials that everybody's really scared of because he wants to serve a new demon lord. And that's how season 2, part 1 ends, with Rimuru becoming a new demon lord. And after that, in season 2, part 2, you get the fallout of that. Plus there's a lot of stuff with Melim, who's like this little kid demon lord. And maybe the most powerful demon lord of them all, but she acts like an overgrown child, and she's like a little girl. Because anime has things with that. Just don't look into it too much. Anime has things with like ridiculously overpowered little girls. It's an entire thing in anime. Don't even get it started. Don't even get the genre started. And Melim is just ridiculously overpowered, even by the standards of this show. And season 2 was all about the political moves being made by other demon lords, and Rimuru having to attend this conference to prove his status as a new demon lord, and to undermine the plots, and maybe Melim's being controlled, but maybe she's not. A demon lord he was forming an alliance with, the leader of the Beastmen, ends up being taken prisoner or maybe even murdered, and they sink Sanctuary in Jura. They have to launch a counterattack, undo the plans, and eventually confront and kill him in a final battle, as I challenge you and only you and your retainers to a duel kind of thing in the middle of the meeting. And of course, he gets utterly wrecked. Because this is that time I get reincarnated as a slime, okay? They're having cool battles, but it's mostly between the subordinates. When it comes to Rimuru shows up and wrecks people. That's his thing. And it's always amazing. It's beautifully animated. It's all wonderful. Because becoming a demon lord has only just upped all his abilities. Like, Great Sage has become, Raphael, who's now, like, almost alive and really sarcastic now. And Rimuru's constantly like, hey, it sounds like you're more coherent now. It's like, no, you're just imagining it. It's like, yeah, Rimuru. and it gets deadpan now, and it's just hilarious. I love it. They're turning the Great Satan into its own character, and it's so much fun. And he also has Beelzebub, which just means he can eat attacks now. Like, the Demon Lord fires off, he's like, ultimate attack at him, and it's just like, Beelzebub, it just eats it. And the Demon Lord's just like, his face. Oh, his face. When Demon Lord Carrion does that, it is, just the funniest thing. It's beautiful, I love it. I love this show so much. This is very much an action comedy. You go here for comedy, okay? You're gonna find a lot to enjoy. But yeah, that's basically it. That's basically the series up to this point. A lot of the stuff is a lot of fun. There's a lot more to it. Like, seriously, there's a lot going on in this series, way more than I have time to talk about, especially since it's getting pretty late and I want to go to bed. For those of you who don't know, I record most of this stuff pretty late at night. Anyway, yeah, so that's about it. I hope you guys love this episode. I definitely want to do more anime in the future. I'm probably going to do some more classic stuff like Code Geass and Death Note if I get a chance, because I love those anime. Well, I say I love Death Note. When I say I love Death Note, to me, Death Note ended with Light killing L. I'm sorry. Everything that happened after that was terrible. I refuse to feel bad about saying that. It is a great 26 episodes out of like 35 episodes, I think. Yeah. Code Geass, on the other hand, is just an amazing series with an amazing ending. Nailed the ending. I will definitely be reviewing those in the future, if I have time. I will try and review some more anime. I've actually been watching a new thing called The Adopted Deities Only Know Peace, which I've been really enjoying. It twists a lot of fantasy genre tropes, which I've always been a sucker for new twists on fantasy genre tropes, instead of just really well done versions of them. So, we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it'll stick the landing on its first season, or whatever its ending is going to be. If it does the whole series at once, I wouldn't particularly mind. But, yeah. So, that's basically it. See you next time. Bye. I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and thank you for listening to The Dragon's Library. Please, subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes. The Dragon's Library releases new episodes Tuesday and Friday each week, and you can follow us on Twitter at dragon_library2. If you want to suggest an episode topic, my email is in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for all your support.